Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Good Deeds No Investing Podcast Open Mic Night. I am flying solo tonight. I am Chris 70, one of your co-hosts. Gail is unable to join us, so I'm going to be talking about selling an REO. So what we'll be talking about is basically, as a note investor, if notes go non-performing, there's opportunities where you may have to foreclose on an asset. You may have to do cash for keys, a deed in lieu, many different forfeiture if it's a land contract, many different things. So we're going to talk about what happens when you get that back and some of the strategies and lessons learned that I have had. And also if people who are on have some lessons learned, be happy to bring you on as well to share some of those stories and really talk about the process, because honestly, it's a process that, to be blunt, it sucks. Just gonna be honest with you. It's typically the properties are pretty dilapidated and they're just, they're not fun to deal with. So let me see here. I'm trying to scroll to the next page. So first thing I just want to talk about are a few upcoming events that we have going on. First, the Cash Flow Expo, which is going on right now, which is an online webinars, about 24, 25 different note investors. I was asked to be a guest on that and provide a 1 hour session regarding a topic. And I chose a topic that many people don't talk about, which is how to deal with borrowers, how to talk with borrowers. Most of us, when we learned from this business, we learned how to bid, how to buy assets. But the moment you bid till it gets boarded and then dealing the management side of it, there's really not a lot out there that talks about it and deals with it. So I spent a good hour just talking about that and some of the strategies and lessons learned that I have and things that I've been implementing. A few other things. Next week, we got Tony Satilli from Satilli and Barilli coming on. We're going to do a follow-up to bankruptcy. That one's going to be more deeper dive into Pacer and what to look for when you're in Pacer. February 20th, we're going to have Adam Bergman from IRA Financial Trust talking about IRA investing. And then on February 27th, we're going to have Anastasia from Safeguard Properties talking about safeguarding your properties and their preservation company. I know I use them. Several other people on here who I speak with also use them as a property preservation company. So we're going to bring her on to also discuss certain aspects of preserving properties, especially ones that we'll talk about tonight. So where to start? So I want to start with, when you're selling an REO property, what do you do? What are the first steps that you should be taking when you get a REO property back? And, first thing that I recommend is really call your preservation company. And you can do this. The timing of this varies. If there's a foreclosure sale and you're going to get it back, you can have somebody check a few days before the foreclosure sale and so forth, but call them. And what you want to do is confirm the occupancy. If it's vacant, you want to get that property secured. And another thing that's important is to transfer, turn off the utilities or turn on certain utilities. For me, I like to have the power on because a lot of properties may have a sump pump in them. And if there's no power on, how do you think that sump pump is going to work? So another strategy you really need to be thinking about is, what's your exit strategy? And are you going to be using a realtor? Now, I recommend this be done ahead of time. You shouldn't, when you get a property back, it's not something that just happens instantaneously. It's typically a long, drawn out process. So you've got plenty of time. So we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. And then the last is, and this fluctuates for me, are you going to sell it as it is or renovate it? And it may change over time. You may not be able to sell it as it is. So you may be looking to renovate it if it's not selling for the price, but you should have an idea up front what your initial strategy is going to be. So the preservation company. So the preservation company and the realtor are really two very key point people in this. And on my screen, you'll see, when you secure a property, and this is from Safeguard, you get to select what it is you want them to do. So, typically I'll do an initial secure, the lockbox, the winterization, and basically check and confirm the property condition. And basically, if it's vacant, I usually will have them register it as well from that standpoint. So, you can see all the things. You can have them transfer the utilities. You can get estimates from them. You can have them cut the grass. And depending on the time of year, uh, you know, you want to make sure one of the things you do is take care of anything that may be a nuisance lien, because once the county catches when this thing is vacant, they find ways, I believe, especially for out of town, out of state investors, of racking up fees and just going after out of state property owners on vacant properties. And I'll ask people in the chat box too, if you've run into this, if you would agree or disagree with that. But I find that they like to do that a lot. The other thing is make sure you get lots of photos of the properties. Now, Safeguard, I think, sometimes goes overboard where I may have like 400 photos, and it's like, are you serious? And the challenge is sometimes there's so many of them close up. It's not like a shot of just the room. It's like a shot of every little, water stain on the ceiling. And it's like, can I just get a picture of the whole ceiling to get an idea, how bad it may be? Also, some things that you can set up with your preservation company. For example, if there's a broken window, there's a set budget where you may have them reglaze that, or you may have them board something up. Those are the things that you have those conversations with, because again, those can add to nuisance liens, but also what we'll talk about if people later on too, people see a property that is vacant, it could be a squatter's heaven. So the way I typically go through with this process is, once I get it taken back, or even, beforehand, if it's, close to being vacant, if it is vacant, first I'll send them out there, do a check to see if it's vacant. If it is vacant, I will have them winterize it. I won't have them take anything out of the property because there still could be personal property in there. And at times, depending, have them change the lockbox in the lock or not. It depends on the status after the foreclosure. And you confirm somebody's not there, then yes, absolutely. But you also got to be careful that you don't lock somebody out of a property. Even though foreclosed, they may still have some rights from that. Any questions on that? On the the preservation side? And the reason I want to talk about the preservation side is because you got to remember, this is the most important thing right now, is this asset. There is no borrower anymore. So there's no working the borrower. You're working this property right now. And, you want to make sure that you put in a condition that's the best for you to try and get rid of this. So the other component to this that I wanted to talk about is, because this, can, be a ping pong battle, is using a realtor versus trying to sell it on your own. And I put together kind of a summary of, the differences between them. And with the realtor, like I said, I recommend you find one early. The way I found realtors, there's a few websites out there that you can try and find the names of some REO agents, but it's still, if you got some more rural properties, you're not going to find people in those databases. So I'll usually check Facebook groups and see the local REO Facebook group, or, find a meetup REO group in that area, and, join it and reach out and say, hey, I've got a property I'm looking to move. Any agents in the area, specifically REOs, also any investors in the area, looking for a property. I've got an off-market property. So you're doing kind of two birds with one stone in that. The other way I find them is through Zillow. And the way I'll do it through Zillow is to avoid getting all those damn phone calls from this guy, Alex, or whatever it is, from Zillow, who then puts you in connection with an agent. And they'll text you 47 times a day. is if you click on a property nearby and it shows all the agents at the bottom, you can click on the agent's name and then you scroll down, and a lot of times it may have a link to their website or Facebook page. What I'll usually do is I don't go to a website. I don't know why agents don't put their emails readily. I don't know if it's something like they can't do it or whatnot, but does anyone else like find it impossible to find a realtor's email address? I don't know if it's just me or if it's something that they're not supposed to do or whatnot, but I find it almost like impossible to get a goddamn email address from a realtor. You'd think, people want to reach out to you. That's how most people reach out to you. So I'll go to their Facebook page and I'll send them something on Messenger, typically. And some of the questions to ask, make sure, ask, do they have any experience with REO properties? And then, also, see if they work with investors, kind of get their experience. If there's somebody that just sells $400,000 properties, that's not the person for you. A few things that I've started to do, and we'll talk about the reasons why when I do some case studies on this, is look to negotiate the commissions based on price drops, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes on case studies. So if people have REOs coming down the pipeline, this segment that's coming up probably is not going to give you a lot of enthusiasm. And then they go visit the property, ask if a home inspection is required, because they may say, well, there's this, there's that. And it's like, and a lot of times they're not fully honest with you in regards to the condition. Oh, it's in rough shape. Well, what's in rough shape? What can we do? Is it, the plumbing, the mechanical? What is it? Because, it's going to generate, who are you selling to? Are you only selling to people who can't buy a regular home? Are you only selling to investors? Who is your crowd? And, let them know if you're going to provide owner financing terms, and ask them if they've done owner financing deals. Because a lot of times you may list it for, call it $50,000, and they're like, oh, it's 50,000. Then it's like, oh, I've got somebody at owner financing who will buy it for, 40,000 at 6%. It's like, no. It's, ask them, because typically, on owner finance deals, the price point might be a few $1,000s higher. So make sure you stipulate those terms ahead of time. So that's if you go on the realtor route. Now let's look at the other end of the spectrum, for sale by owner route. For me, it's very challenging. Several reasons why. Places you can put it on. Typically you get a lot of non-qualified borrowers, especially on Facebook Marketplace and others, when they see owner financing, and even you put 10% down, they're like, I got $500. And it's just time spent responding to people. And honestly, it's frustrating. Next component is, how are people going to gain access? You do not, trust me, you do not want to put your own lockbox and just give random people the codes. Trust me, you don't want to do that. Because I have, and it doesn't work out. So that is another component. To me, it's worth paying a realtor if it's, 6% on $30,000, $1,800. The other one, if the property's junk, this may be a better option to sell to an investor. So maybe, not using a realtor and using these components possibly could be. But again, you go back to number 2, how are you getting these so-called investors access? The time I did try to do this, basically all appliances and copper got ripped out of the place. So yeah, you got to be careful. You can also start with for sale by owner and then get an agent, and you can market the deal to other investors, while it's still listed with an agent. I've had properties where, I listed with an agent, but I'm still trying to market it as well, just to, again, try and get rid of this thing. So those are, some of the differences between a realtor and for sale by owner. And, I'm going to tell you, I lean towards a realtor, and then you're going to hear my case studies right now and be like, why are you using a realtor? Some people actually might look to use a property manager or just some random person, just let people in and out of a property. That's an option as well, to be honest. So I want to talk some case studies that I have. So the first is what I call the Flint Foo Bar. And this was a property that I foreclosed on in the water mecca, Flint, Michigan. And the property was vacant. The property wasn't in bad shape. It needed about $3,000 to get rent ready. And I listed it through a national REO company. And one of the worst mistakes I've ever made. They had an agent who was not from the area, basically useless. They provide a weekly report, and I'd laugh because it was the same report every single week. 2 people visited, price too high. 2 people visited, price too high. When I told them, I said, hey, look, this was listed at $20,000 property. And they're telling me, come back and say, well, we think it's worth like 7 or 8. I'm like, I know it's worth more than that, but how about we cancel a contract? They're like, we'll cancel a contract, but you have to pay the $2,000 fee. And I'm like, okay, then just keep it at 20,000. I'm not going to drop the price. And, the agent can keep going by. And, every week they go by and, they put the same report, 2 showing. So I'd ask the question, I'd be like, so how tall is the grass? Was the grass cut this week? And they're like, oh, we'll get back to you on that. We'll get back to you on that. And I knew when the grass was getting cut because I was having my preservation company go for it, but they would never answer the question. So reality was this agent was doing absolutely nothing. So I basically told them that, look, you know what? You're not going to cancel. I'm just going to make you, we'll both wait the 6 months. And I actually had it sold to another investor, which basically waited till the contract got canceled. And then I just turned around and, sold it to them and, ended up not being a bad deal. Wasn't a grand slam by any means, but I could have turned it into a rental. But at the time, I was just the REO company just pissed me off so much. I just wanted to get rid of this property, and basically, could have kept it. Probably got 5 something a month in rent, and I'd gotten it rent ready for the investor. Who ended up buying it because he was going to do it. And I said, hey, look, I'm sitting here waiting till it cancels. Why don't I just do it? And we, worked it out as part of the sale price. So that was my Flint Foo Bar. My other one was the renovation that never happened. And this is the one where I had the copper stolen out of the property. So this was the one that I talked about probably, 6-8 months ago, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on my first renovation of the property. And at first, I was going to renovate it, and I had a local guy kind of managing it. And I put the new roof on the place, and I had 2 agents go by and basically say, hey, it's probably worth about $25,000 as is and about $70,000 renovated. So I started getting bids. And at that point in time, the agent was also a property manager, and I kind of turned it over to them. And they started getting bids. And so this was in Fort Wayne. And if you're trying to find a contractor in Fort Wayne, good flipping luck. I know Dan's on here as well, and Dan can probably attest to that. You cannot find anybody who's decent, and anyone that's decent is very busy. So we start getting bids come in around 30,000, and I was like, okay, it's 25 as is, 55. It's like, is it worth spending 30,000 and maybe pocket a few thousand? So we kept going back and forth, and like I said, prior to getting this agent, I had it listed to get some contractors as well as some fix and flippers in there to determine which way I was going to go, and that's when the appliances and copper got stolen. But then I had a contractor lined up for 26,000, and he bailed on me. And then after that, I was like, you got to be kidding me. So the agent, had listed it at 25,000. And the bids, everything was coming in, $10,000-$12,000. And again, take note, said it was worth 25, sold, end up selling it at about 12,500 at the end of the day. So 50% of the price the agent told me it was worth. Keep track of that because you're going to see a theme coming down the pipeline. So let's talk my Wisconsin deal. This was a cash for keys deal that actually didn't have to give the cash because they didn't clean the place out. So I ended up having to get the place cleaned out. Agent had access to property. Agent actually helped me get it cleaned out. The agent, the entire time, even before I took this thing, said, "Yep, nothing in this neighborhood sells for less than 35,000. This one, I've been inside. It's not bad shape. It needs some work, but this is a $40,000 property." Basically pounding his chest, talking about how great he was, so forth, so on. Now, the interesting thing with this property was I bought this property actually very cheap. I paid under $5,000 for the CFD. And the reason why was there was like $12,000 in taxes owed. So, I was going to play the game. Okay, do I keep the property and let it go to tax sale and collect the overage? Or do I pay the taxes and turn around and sell it? And I'm sitting and thinking, okay, when he's telling me it's worth about 40,000, if it went to tax sale, it probably wouldn't, would not sell for that. It would sell for a lot less. So, I'd get my, they probably pay the taxes and, I might make a few bucks, but if I pay the taxes on it, I have a chance for a higher return. So I pay the taxes on it and so forth. And this is, I don't know, 5 months ago. It is still sitting on the market right now. We're down to like 31,000 is the list price. And the agent basically, got an offer at 25,000 2 weeks ago, and is like, "Yeah, we're gonna offer a great offer, 25,000. I absolutely think you should take this. This is the best offer, and this is probably in line with what the house is worth." So he texts me that. So I pick up the phone, I call him, I say, "So now you're telling me after 3 months, we keep lowering the price, that it's worth 25 when you told me it was originally worth 40. I said, "That's a big discount." I said, "So are you going to discount your commissions by that much?" "Well, I'm really not making anything," and so forth. I'm like, "Well, should you be making anything? Because you had access to the property. You knew, you've been inside the property. Isn't it your job to get an idea what it is?" And I can tell you, the market has not dropped that much in this area. "Well, the neighborhood isn't as great." I'm like, "You told me about this neighborhood. You've known about this neighborhood, and you still told me it was 40,000. And your exact words were, nothing typically sells for less than 40,000 unless it is a complete, junk, and it will sell in the 30s. So this one's still on the market, and part of me is, basically, the 25,000. I countered in the person to accept it, but I almost, at this point in time, got another month left with this agent, and basically be like, see you later after this one. And if I turned around and sold it for 25, I'd rather sell it to an agent that basically was honest with me up front. But as you can see, pretty much almost another 50% discount. So this one's about 40%. So let's talk about another one I got right now in Minnesota. This was another cash for keys deal. And, this one was in a little more rural area, and the agent basically, went out to the property, looked at it, and says, "Yeah, it needs, good amount of work." And I said, "Okay, I want to price this thing so it's sold in 30 days. I said, "I don't want to deal with this thing for more than 30 days. And he says, "Okay, we're going to list it at 40,000. I said, "Are you confident I'd be getting an offer somewhere near that at 40,000 within 30 days? "Absolutely, absolutely." And I said, "Okay, so we can, have a clause that after 90 days, I can cancel the contract," is what it was. It was a 3-month contract in this one. As you can see, I was getting a little smarter. Not that much, as you'll see in a second. And on this one, told me, it's valued, this is a $40,000 property. So didn't have many showings. And basically we had one showing, and they said, "Too much work, price too high." So I text him, I'm like, "Hey, what do you think we should do?" He goes, "Well, the property is overpriced. We need to drop the price." So I pick up the phone again, and he texts me. I pick the phone, call him. I said, "So again, what was our initial conversation about listing the property?" I said, "Did I not tell you I wanted this thing sold in 30 days and I wanted it priced at that point?" "Well, yeah, but this is what I thought." I said, what you thought was, of course, well off, and so forth. And then I said, what do we need to drop this thing to sell this thing? He goes, uh, 25 to 30. I said, so you go in the span of 45 days. Okay. So 45 days from 40,000 down to 25,000. Yeah. And I at one point laid into this guy and said, you must be one hell of an agent, you know? um, and probably shouldn't have said that because now he's probably doing absolutely nothing for me on this property. But honestly, I don't think he was doing anything for me anyways. So right now we still have it on the market for 30,000 and, still being told it's priced too high. So, we might have to look again at another price adjustment on it. And I bet you in 2 months time, I'm going to come back on here and tell you that property sold for between $20,000 and $25,000. So, okay, I've got more. Let's see if anyone picks up this common theme. So here's my Indiana deal, which was a forfeiture. Agent again had access to the property. Agent said, nothing in town is listed for under 60,000, so let's list this at 50,000. I said same thing. I want this thing gone within 30 or 45 days. Oh, well, 50,000. She goes, we'll definitely be getting something in the 40s. So this was back in, call it November. So right now, still on the market, 33,000. She calls me. She goes, what's your drop dead number so I know where to be? I'm like, it's not about where you need to be. You need to tell me what the property is worth, which you've clearly already blown because we've already had to reduce the price by almost 40% on it. So yeah, this one's still on market. And actually, I talked to the agent today, and she's like, "Oh, I got an interested buyer, and so forth, so on." And I said, "Oh, it's nice, about time, and so forth." So we'll see how that one turns out. But one thing I'll mention is all of these properties were not, live-in ready. Just being honest, and so forth. They all needed some work. So, and then here's one, my Alabama deal. This one closed yesterday, so all excited. Woo! It was a cash for keys deal on a land contract, and it was under agreement for the asking price, which this was like, the planets aligned on this one. So we get the offer, get everything signed, accepted, so forth. And then the title company comes in. Title company clearly not experienced with land contracts or tax liens. It got to the point where I literally wanted to shove a fork in my eye. And I say that because there was a tax lien from 2015. And this was one from Home Opportunity, which many of you have bought from. And they paid it off. Or actually, the servicer, SN, basically paid off the tax lien, so taxes were current. So they, as part of the title review, come to me and say, first off, who is SN servicing? And you need to get a deed from, Jane Smith, who bought the tax lien back in 2015 into your entity. And then the whole land contract thing completely, and it had gone to the court, and it was actually a court, the court signed off on it. So I said, what do you mean I need to get a deed from the taxes were sold? I said, yes, the taxes were sold. The property wasn't sold. And I'm like, here is the document from 2017 that's in the recorder's office that says the taxes were paid in full. Yeah, but you still need, I'm like, so I was like, told my agent, I'm like, I'm not dealing with this title company. So thankfully I have a good relationship with title company that I sent it over to them and said, can you assist and deal with these people and kind of explain it to them? So we finally get everything resolved, we think. The day before the closing, the title agent calls me, and this is an asset that's in one of my funds. Calls me up, says, got a big problem. So what's that? He says, your fund documents say that you can't sell property until the 18th month. And I said, I don't have it in front of me, but I can absolutely tell you that is not the case. So I said, let me call you back in 10 minutes. So I go and I pull up the fund documents, and it's hilarious because I'm reading these documents, and the documents basically give me as the manager, I can buy, I can sell, I can do this, I can do backflips. I have the authority to, buy and sell real estate. And in one of the things, it says this is a 2-year, a 24-month closed end fund, and the manager will start liquidating assets around the 18th month. So he interpreted that language as I have no rights at all to sell any property before the 18th month. And I'm like, I don't know how you could even interpret that way, but that's just for information so people know who are in the fund. Yes, it's 2 years, and oh, by the way, I'm not going to wait till the last day to sell everything off. And I said, read section 10 that clearly states that I have the authority to do all of these things, and at no time restrictions at all. So he basically creates a affidavit for me to sign that gives me the right to sell the property. And, he copied my attorney on it as well. And my attorney basically sat there and went through, he's like, oh man, did I screw something up at first? And, reads it and then reads this affidavit and said, if this isn't CYA, I have clearly no idea what it is. But they made me get a letter from SN Servicing, knowing what their role was. And I mean, it was just completely insane. So the closing was literally delayed 4 weeks due to this issue. And so when you think you actually get a deal to the finish line and actually get something sold, in comes the title company. So, I bring this up because, this is all part of that process with the REO. So it's, once you think you get through one hurdle, there's another one that's coming. So here are my top 10 lessons. Lesson number 1, a realtor is like a meteorologist. I don't think I have to say any more than that. So, second thing is add language to the agreement. Either I wouldn't go more than 90 days or reduce commission or something, basically letting them know, hey, look, here's my goal on this thing. And you better understand that, because if it costs me, you're going to feel some of that pain as well. Number 3, secure the property, keep it in good shape. You want to try and avoid squatters. I have found that the borrower or borrower's family are most likely people to be a squatter. I actually had an REO that I owner financed to somebody, and the borrower and there was 2 borrowers, and one of them, they got divorced because she ran off with her boss or something like that, and basically he moved out of the area, so she ended up moving back in after he moved out. Thankfully, that was a squatter I didn't have to deal with. When you go sell, another big thing is get the property cleaned out. I think that's really important. If you got trash and everything around, it's just going to devalue, significantly. I don't use my preservation companies a lot of times for cleanouts or for any work in general, because the pricing is just so absurd. And when we have Anastasia on here, I'm going to mention that to her and kind of get a reaction from her on that. So that'll be an interesting one. Usually I'll find a local cleanout company. Here's one for you, though. On the Indiana property, I found a cleanout guy. It was actually trash outside, so I went to hire a guy on Craigslist because I'm like, trash outside. I hired a guy who hired another guy. So when I had them send pictures of when everything was done, it was from the guy he hired. So I paid this guy who was a scam artist and never paid the guy who actually did the work. So eventually the guy who did the work called my agent, and then he called me, and basically, it was his truck. I mean, I saw the picture of the truck and so forth. Somebody on Craigslist found him and hired him. Lo and behold, I was able to find this guy on Craigslist who did it, and let's just say I've had some fun with him. I won't go any further with that. Him and his family. Um, I have not done anything wrong, illegal. Just uh, uh, have some fun. Let's see. Winterize a property no matter what. That's I don't care where you are. You want to turn that water off. And honestly, try and keep power on because again, depends if it has a sump pump. You want to make sure you don't have 4 feet of water in the basement. Too many stories like that. If an agent takes a while early on to get back to you, that's a bad sign. You know, if you can't find one, you're better off waiting, trying a little harder to find a good one than signing up with a bad one. Next is ask the agent if they list in Facebook groups on Facebook. A lot of times the challenge is these properties are so cheap they don't want to spend 5 minutes of their time. And if there's realtors on here, I apologize. I know I'm stereotyping, and I shouldn't, but it's just like any business. There's a lot of realtors who are very lazy and just put in an MLS and don't want to do anything. Not saying all, but there are some like that, and those are the ones you want to try and avoid. And it's also a good idea for you to post it in groups as well. Input in your mailers or whatever it is. Try and get people interested. Just got to be careful with Craigslist and stuff like that because that's where sometimes squatters can see it and stuff, and that's basically free lunch for them. Another option is call property managers in the area and see if they have investors as well. So they may have some investors who would be interested in it. I've had some success with that, and that actually seems to have worked, honestly. Or, like I said, in meetup groups, if you reach out to someone and say, hey, I'll pay you a commission if you can get somebody to, if you do a quick presentation on this for me and sell a property, toss you $500 or something like that. It's another option. Number 9, yes, if you get a code violation, call the code enforcement officer and talk to them about it. Let them know you're not a bad guy and let them know you're trying to just, keep the property clean and keep it nice and, looking to get rid of it and basically let them know, hey, look, I was the lender. This person, is the one who destroyed the place. They weren't a tenant, so I didn't have rights to do anything and so forth. I got a letter today from a county where they're going to go tow a boat from a yard. And basically it's like I said, I call them up and say, it's a land contract, so it's not my boat and I can't, it's personal property. So please tow it. There's nothing I can do. Last one, and this is one that I would bet most people do not do. Let your bookkeeper know it's an REO. And the reason I say that is, from a note to an REO, it is very, very different how you can allocate costs, especially if you end up keeping that as a rental and where you can and cannot do deductions. So that's especially if you're going to keep it as a rental. The moment you take that, make sure you start putting some of those costs in. As an REO versus because of the schedule C versus I forget the schedules, but it's very, very different from an accounting perspective. And I believe putting it as an REO actually is more beneficial for you. So those are my lessons. If I ran the numbers, again, it's pretty eye-opening on where you start versus where you end up. A lot of times, and very rarely, I would have to say the average price reduction is somewhere, I'm guessing about 40% from where you start. So, and also, side note that BPOs, we all get BPOs at the beginning as well. I would say most properties are 50 to 60% off of a BPO. So I've had one property that actually I was shockingly surprised that was in really good shape. But for the most part, uh, yeah, not even close to what the BPOs are coming in at. So, which, that's a big thing because, we got a $50,000 BPO, and it's a $50,000 note, you might be paying, you know, 25, 30 grand for that thing. If it's really only worth 25, 30 grand, you're done, so, um, and that's one of the reasons why vacant properties, I learned my lesson on buying a few vacant properties. I pretty much am not going over like 10 cents on the dollar. I will not bid more than like 10,000 on a vacant property and be like, it's vacant. You can have it then, because I can tell you, unless they would allow for an interior inspection, which typically in a lockbox is on it, typically they don't. It's the vacant ones just aren't worth the time. So great question from Dan. If I'm still prone BPOs, considering how far are they off? So Dan, it depends, but I'd say now 90% of the time I am not. And Chad, who's on here as well, I think him and I do something very similar. So I send Safeguard out to the property, and they'll take 5 or 6 photos. Sometimes they may only take 1 or 2, and then I yell at them, and I'm trying to train them on what it is exactly I want. So they'll go out and take a bunch of photos, and then I use data tree, and I'll go on and I'll put recent sales within like a mile or two. And then what I'll usually do is I'll usually call a property manager, not a realtor, a property manager, and say, I got a property in this area. How is it for a rental? What's the area like? Because agents, going to be very careful about what they can say about the areas and so forth. Property managers are more, hey, it's a good rental area. It's not a good rental area. It kind of gives you an idea. Or it's mostly single family homes. So I'll usually pull it from there and then get it, and the property manager will tell you, hey, look, there's, that's, a street with, a lot of abandoned homes or whatever it is. I usually find I get more information from a property manager than a realtor, to be honest with you, but I'll still try conversations with realtor. But I'm not paying them $150 for the BPO because, again, they are just completely so off. It's not even, it's laughable. Now, the times when it's beneficial to get one is if it's way off and the seller's got a BPO of 80,000, you're like, dude, this thing's worth 30. You may have to get one at that point in time. But what I'll do then is I'll usually take the photos I have and send it to them, and then have them just kind of plug it into a CMA and give me a value. Because that's really all they're doing is getting the photos and plug it in. Usually you can, that if it's just one of them, they'll usually kind of do it for nothing for you. So that's kind of, my validation, but, that's a great question because, you know, it's now here's not, I've been on some assets recently that are, 150, $250,000 homes. That's a different story because those, are not 30, 40, 50, $70,000 homes. Those are more sustained homes, which I think agents can get a better idea for those. These lower priced homes, they're just, they're challenging. So that's kind of what I've been doing lately with those. Any other questions? Anyone have besides questions? Anyone have a story they would like to share regarding their REO? I'm sure somebody on here may have a story that they'd want to share about an REO, good, bad, and different. So forth. And while I wait for people, I just want to note a few things, everybody who's listening. If you haven't already, if you go to 70investments.com/freebies, I have put up there scope of work, contract templates. There's probably 10 or 12 items I put up there for standard note investors for things you can run in your business, a business plan, let's see, like I said, a balance sheet, so you can understand what a balance sheet looks like. Like I said, there's 10 or 12 items on there. They're all free. I just wanted to give them out to people. I think there was a performing note calculator on there as well. So go on there, check it out, and feel free to download it, criticize it, tell me you love it, whatever it may be. So let me stop sharing. Come back here. So yeah, educating title companies. It's interesting because, you would think title insurance is, it's insurance, it's pretty standard. It is furthest from that. And you definitely want to, if you're doing things, work with a title insurance company who is sophisticated with tax liens and stuff like that. I know, like in Indiana, Meridian, I think Meridian Title in Indiana is like the go-to title company for tax liens if you've got a property. So that's definitely one to look into if you're in Indiana trying to resolve tax issues. I'm sorry, title issues. Any other questions, comments before we wrap it up for the evening? Kept it under an hour. That's my goal this year. Try and keep them under an hour. But this won't get published till after Tony probably comes on. So I will bet you Tony goes longer than an hour. Tony likes to talk like I do. So, and it's actually a good topic. So I'm sure everyone will find it very worthwhile. Good. Well, if nobody has any more questions, then I'm going to wrap it up for this evening. So thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. Make sure to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any of those stations that you listen to. And we are back up and rocking and rolling with new episodes. We got new episodes publishing 2 coming up next week, and you'll start seeing our next episodes coming as we get closer to show 100. So thank you all and have a good evening.